Welcome, everybody. Zach Shelley here with Management Unfiltered, and we're on another awesome episode because every single episode is awesome. And we have a great guest here today, which is a good friend of mine, which is already laughing because this episode is going to be even more awesome because it's Kirk Teachout. And if you have not met Kirk before, he is super photogenic. All his videos on Facebook and Instagram are always super clean. I mean, I'm looking at him right here. Great haircut, dude. But no, Kirk is a great friend. He puts out amazing media and just all around with dentistry. He's built a practice with his wife, and done some really awesome things with a part-time schedule and producing 7 figures, which is amazing. So Kirk, why don't you just tell a little bit about yourself other than your good looks?
Wow. Okay. What an intro there. And I'm just going to point out, we both cut our own hair. So, no, I appreciate that intro. It's a lot of fun being on podcasts and obviously hanging out with you. It was kind of, I felt like kismet last year when we first met at Intellicon, but just kind of going through the motions and continually building that relationships. It's always fun hanging out and talking with you. But, a little bit about me, I'm not a career dental person. If I would have asked myself 10 years ago, I was like, or told myself that I would be in the dental field and I'd be coaching doctors and, practice owners and office managers, then I would be like, you're joking me. Right. Because I was touring the world. I was in a band and I was managing artists and I was producing for big bands and I was from the music industry. So trying to figure out how to create raving fans out of something that only I loved, being my music, through marketing and branding and creating that amazing experience through a show. Like, that's my background. So now 6 years ago, when my wife was like, hey, I've been an associate for a year and a half, I'm tired of doing that. If I buy a practice, will you help me? It's like, okay, as a loving husband that I am, I'm like, okay, well, I'll help you. So I pulled back from the music industry quite a bit. I still dabbled quite a bit with the clients I had and kind of with anybody who needed it. But I just helped her. And we bought in September 2019. So if you do the math, that's 6 months prior to COVID. But during COVID, honestly, hindsight's 2020. Which has an even more profound meaning now, right? But hindsight's 2020. So when you were looking during COVID around, you're just like, nobody knew what we were doing. Nobody knew what was going on in the world, what was going to happen. Even I was, in the grocery store with gloves on, watching people like take their gloves off, use the stuff, and then put gloves back on and all sorts. I was like, okay, nobody knows how to use PPE correctly. It was so bad. But I was at least using it. I mean, I feel like grocery shopping was the easiest time during that period, simply because like I was getting a month's worth of groceries at a time, just so that way I would limit the amount of time I would be going out, right? We were planning our meals. Who does that? I mean, it was amazing. Because we had time, we had time to sit down and think about those things. And I piggybacking off of that, like, that's the reason why I feel like that was a turning point for us in our practice, because every day up to that, when you first buy a practice, and even if you're an office manager hopping onto a brand new acquisition or a brand new startup, you're just trying to keep your head above water, right? You're trying to go through the motions and just try to really get through the chaos at that point, because nobody knows what they're doing. We got home and during those 2 months, we thought about really 2 things. What do we want and how do we want to do it? And so in doing that, we really focused on the patient experience. Like, what do we want that to look like? Right? We focused on our schedule, which is why everybody hires me, right? Because we were able to create a super efficient schedule of, $16,000 days with one doctor. That's not chaotic. On 3 days a week, and that kind of evolved. We didn't go straight to 3 days a week right then, but we thought about those 2 questions. What do we want and how do we want to do it? And and just like, okay, we have kids. Like, we want to spend more time with our kids. So we exclusively came back after COVID at 3.5 days a week. And we saw a 56% increase in collections. We're like, oh, wow. Like night and day. That first week, there's a night and day difference of the culture in our practice, of not only from the patients, but mainly the team. They're like, oh, we have so much energy. Just cutting out 3 hours on a Thursday was just like, whoa,
Mind
crazy.
blowing.
It is. It is. Then a year later, my wife went on her first maternity leave in our practice with our third child. And it was crazy. I mean, we couldn't find anybody. So our practice is in a rural area. So it was very difficult to find anybody to come in and cover for her. So we were like, oh no, like this is going to be real tough. But she at least wanted 6 weeks off, and more if she could, but 6 weeks was like the minimum. So we found somebody who was renovating their office at the same time, who was local. We were like, oh, this is perfect. And, she went, I think she graduated a year after my wife. So they knew each other already. So it worked out really well. But she had never done more than $6,000 a day in her whole office, including hygiene. Right. So it was just like, okay, I don't know what we're going to do here, because my wife was doing $10,000, $12,000 days just on her own. But during those 3 weeks that she was in there, Dr. Bird produced $15,000 days every single day in our office, which that was kind of a light bulb moment for me. I was like, okay, clearly we have something here, right? Something's going on that's really cool. And it always, leads back to the systems. It leads back to the systems you have in place, not only with, the written down SOPs and things like that, but really the team. It's like the team is leading the practice. Otherwise, Dr. Bird wouldn't have been able to do that, right? They were able to tell her where to go, when to do it, how to maximize the appointments, how to maximize the morning huddle and be effective, like we've talked about before, which led to $15,000 consistent days where she was just like, I've never done this before in my life. And now she's taken that back to her practice and is thriving now. So I mean, that's a little bit about me. And after that maternity leave, we went back came back exclusively 3 days a week, and then saw another jump in production and revenue. And it's just kind of been that way ever since. It's like we work Monday through Thursday. Our team's there a half day on Thursday, or Monday through Wednesday, half day on Thursday. And then, we just do what we do.
When you're talking about Dr. Bird going through their new team, kind of being the ones guiding her, I always like to tell people it's like air traffic controllers, like your assistants and your hygienists and your front desk and OM, like they're looking high level saying, all right, you need to do this, you need to do this. And so at our practice, we have a general office, but we also have a pedo practice. And more than anything, pedo's fast, it's wild, kids are screaming. And really the assistants are directing the doctor all day long. Like, nope, no, turn around, you're going here. Like, they need to be guided. And when you have those systems in place, like you talked about, Kirk, that's what allows the dentist to be able to do what they need to do and do what's most important. Because there's a lot of times that they'll be doing things that they feel is important, but it's actually, hindering your production. We've made some small changes in our practice, and our provider on pedo is up 30% just by doing little things, by utilizing EFDAs more. I mean, that was one of the smallest changes we made, and such a massive increase. And we talk about music, we look at a mixing board, right? Like, you're not sitting there cranking knobs. No, if you are, you definitely don't know what you're doing, but you're making small titrations to those mixers to make sure it sounds perfectly. And that's what we need to be doing in practice. But you made a super good point, which not a lot of practices are able to do it. COVID forced you into it. And I think this is something we should kind of just extrapolate on, is the importance of kind of stepping back and looking at your systems and saying, what do we want? And like, walk me through that a little bit, Kirk, because like y'all didn't have a choice, right? Like, the shutdown happened, so you had time on your hands. But like, what does that look like for practice today that we're not in a pandemic, that like we need to look at, like kind of step back a little bit? How do we actually do that and still function? And how do we figure out what we want?
I think, this is why people hire me, right? Because even my wife, doesn't always know what she wants. I think that's finding in a world that we are so focused on social media and what other people have, it's hard to really hone in on what we personally want, right? So something I do with the first thing I do with anybody I'm working with is is called the Vision Lab. And I'd call it the Vision Lab because we've got to figure out where we're going. Like we've got to figure out the end goal for all of this and then reverse engineer it from there. So for instance, I start with the personal side for people because I'm like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to bring home $1 million? Do you want to bring home $300,000? Do you want to do $150,000? Right? Like, what is your goal? And that can change, but I need something to work with, right? So, as a practice, let's just say we want $1 million practice, which is kind of like the mark, right? That's the starting mark that everybody's trying to strive for. So $1 million practice, and if you just reverse engineer it, it's like, okay, in order to hit $1 million, then we need to be able to collect $83,000 a month. That's the magic number, the rule of 83. And then, if let's say we work 4 days a week, okay, so you divide that by 16 because that's 4 days a week for a month, roughly. So that's a little over $5,200 a day. So then we look at the hour if you want to, but like even then it's just like, okay, $5,200 a day. That's fairly simple. Like if you have two hygienists, or just say one hygienist that's doing an average of $1,000 to $1,500 a day, which they should be, then you can make up, $3,000 to $4,000 as a doctor, as a provider, with a crown and a handful of fillings and maybe an extraction and emergency visit. Like it's not that difficult when you actually break it down, but we make it too complex and it gets harder.
Well, and I think too, it's made complex because you don't have goals defined, you don't have vision defined, and you don't truly know what success looks like. Because maybe your goal is 1 million, and that's meeting or exceeding your goal. But what do you define being successful? Because, maybe your first year is 500,000. So anything above that, or am I happy with 800,000 for my following year, but the goal is 1 million? Like you have to define what being successful in that too is, in order to not feel like you're failing. But a lot of times we just don't even know what our goals are or our vision is and where we want to go first. And so we make these complex systems because you don't know where you're going. It's like just giving a map to your child and saying, all right, color on it, and that's where we're going to drive. It's like, whew, that's going to be wild.
Yeah. I mean, I remember growing up, we would, I think Sunday afternoons, like after worship, we would just drive, right? That was back when gas was 99 cents. So it wasn't as big of a deal, but we would do that. But to your point, like, I think a perfect example of that was when I came down to your office, right? The team didn't know where they were, like, what they were really striving for. They didn't know where they were going, right? And since then, we broke kind of the barrier of numbers a little bit with Dr. Calderon, and like, okay, wow, this is what we're going for. Like, okay, cool. Like, and then we broke it down, right? And that's why I asked you for your goals, because if we don't know where we're going, then we're just kind of throwing things at the wall, hoping it sticks. And it was crazy that was it your treatment coordinator that was just like, okay, let's do it. Like, this is a stretch goal, but like, we can do that. And it's not going to be that hard. It's just lining it out.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you have to have defined visions, defined goals. And a lot of times, like, this is where doctors, if you're sitting in on this podcast listening, which we have a good deal of doctors that listen to this, if you're not vocalizing this with either your OM or your team of like where you want to go, that's your first failure. Because we don't know where you want to be. We don't, if you're like, hey, I want to retire by the time I'm 50, I want to make this practice a $2.5 million practice, and I want to do it in this amount of years. Okay, then perfect. We at least know what you want to do and where you want to go. Or, hey, I want to see new patients every single month to be over 100 new patients, and I want to make my active patient load 4,000 active patients, and I want to keep that consistent, and I want to be producing $5,000 a day. Like you have to tell your team what you're wanting to do. And if you don't have an office manager, it's going to be a little more difficult just because you're going to have to get the entire team, and you're going to be the OM, and you're going to be leading your team and saying, hey, this is where we're going, and this is what I want to do. And then you figure out, how do we do this?
For sure. And there are different stages to that, right? Because, obviously like you're running a much larger practice, but I'm not even at the practice anymore. And it runs without me with 2 providers. So, but that's because of the intentionality of the systems. And I just look at dental intelligence for the numbers to make sure I'm in, where they need to be. And then I just like, they just text me right now. It's like, hey, we need referral cards. That's all they text me.
But that's when the system's working how it should, right? You've given them the tools in their tool belt. And until there's a tool that's missing, say there's something that's just not in that belt that they need to know, then perfect, they'll reach out and do it. And that's the same thing for you, Doc. Like, Kirk's wife is the dentist. So, like until they need you should empower them to be able to do everything that they need and give them a system in play to take care of what they need to take care of. Because ultimately, what do we really want? We want happy patients that are going to refer other happy patients.
Yeah, and trusting your team too. I think that's probably, this is, and we're going to go down this rabbit hole because, man, okay, trusting your team to do the job, right? If you can't trust them to do what you need them to do, then that's a reflection of leadership, one. Whether it be the OM or the practice owner, but that's also something you need to work on. So, if you can trust them to do at least 80% of what you would do, because nobody's going to do what you would do because you are way more emotionally invested in this than anybody else from a practice owner's perspective. But even an OM, like especially if you get profit sharing and all sorts of stuff like bonuses and stuff that are tied to it. So it's just like, okay, you have to be emotionally invested in it, but you have to trust that team to do at least 80% like of what they should be doing and being okay with that. And it is not going to be perfect, but I talked to my wife about the margin of error, right? She's upset with the 10 patients out of 2,000 active patients that we have that just didn't, like the crown, didn't work out, or the root canal failed, or something happened with those 10 patients, or like we dropped the ball and not getting a pre-med out or something. Like it's just like, okay, babe, I will be okay with that margin of error. Like, we are not perfect. We strive for perfection, but we are not perfect. And if we really, have a high standard, which we do, but if we define success as perfection with that high standard,
it's never attainable.
Yeah, it's never attainable. And the bar is, okay, the only way we have success is by doing it perfect. Then we're going to have a super miserable life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like when we're just backtracking a little bit to the trust factor, right? Because it's a really deep subject. Trust isn't blind. Like trusting your team doesn't mean you're just giving everything on their plate and you're walking away. Like trust still has systems in place. It also has markers where you can backtrack and figure out, okay, are they doing their job? Are they doing it well? Like we have to have those factors put in place. But then also like Kirk said, like if we're striving for perfection, like that's never going to happen. But if you say I want 99.9% collections or 99.2% of collections, like that's what we're aiming for is darn near close. But like is going to be errors no matter what. There's too many factors that we work with and deal with from day to day. Like, and we could have done our best job. And that's one of the other things too, is can we measure, like, did we at least attempt to do our job well? And there may have just been an outside barrier that caused us to not be successful in this situation. As far as a pre-med, say it was entered in the chart, but we use DoSpot, but like say you went to send it through that and then the ERX just didn't go through. It's like, well, it was put in. It didn't go through, and that's outside of our control. And sometimes it isn't our control, but it depends on what you do with that too. Like if you say, yes, you know what, we did mess up, but I've corrected, and this is how I corrected it. It's what we do with those things of when we don't hit our marks, of how we move forward. And I think that's what truly, in my mind, is what success looks like. Is I say, hey guys, like what happened here? Oh, this patient fell off, but guess what? I've already put 2 other ones on. It's like my team this morning. We had one of the doctor's schedules fall apart, and he was way under goal. Now he's like $3,000 over goal, all in sense of an hour, you know. And some of the assistants are like, I don't know what we're gonna do. I'm like, front desk got it. They're gonna move these patients here, here, and here, and they'll be good to go. And sure enough, he's doing like $7,000 a day.
Yeah. And I think too, like kind of playing off that, right? So you've got to kind of look at it from a 30,000 foot view sometimes too. Obviously we try to hit our daily goals. We try to do that. Like there's a reason for that, but you also need to back up and look at the average, right? It's like, sure, maybe you have a bad day. Okay. Well, everybody has a bad day, and you try to mitigate that, and, you know, you focus on the small things, but you know, at the end of the day, you look at it from a higher up view, and you're like, okay, but this quarter, we're actually doing really well. We're ahead of where we're supposed to be. You know, we get stuck in the weeds a lot, as Steve Carell would say. Michael Scott would say, really, micromanagement. So we micromanage, right, a little too much, but we get a little caught in the weeds when we start nitpicking at like, oh man, that wasn't perfect. Oh man, this could be better. Oh man, okay, cool. Something I do, especially when I have new employees when I'm onboarding, is look at one thing, right? Especially if you're having trouble with these potential problems, like a pre-med, you know, not being sent or whatever. It's like, okay, let's focus on doing that. I know I was talking with Dr. Calderon, you know, right after I did that workshop, and he was just like, I just wanted them to take photos of patients, right? And I had a marker, and it was like, okay, this is what I want you to do. Just one thing. Take photos of every patient that comes in if they don't have a photo. And he looked at it and then audited it, and he was like 87% of the patients that day got photos. It's like, okay, see, that's a small thing, but if you focus on it, if you focus on that one thing for that week or that day or whatever it is, like you got to figure out the load of your team. But if that's the things and it's measurable, then like, okay, tomorrow we're going to try to do a little bit better. Tomorrow, the next day, we're going to try to do a little bit better. And so I try to focus on, you know, especially day one, is like, okay, I just want you to greet patients. That's all I want you to do. I want you to say their name as soon as they walk through the door. Make sure that, you know, everybody knows they're here, and then that's it. Because I want you to focus on the patient experience. Like, because if we can nail that and that's second nature, then all the nuance is going to come after, right? So if you can get your team to focus on one thing, whether it's hygiene, like, hey, I want you to make sure to take intraoral photos on every single patient every day, right? That's what I want you to focus on this week. In assistance, same thing. In emergencies, like, hey, take an intraoral photo every single time. So you just have that one thing, and then it's measurable because you can go back and audit. Okay, how many patients did we actually do it? And, or really, we need to delegate that, right? We don't need to do it. So they're like, hey, at the end of the day, go through all the patients that you just saw and say, how many did I see? How many did I take a picture on? And hand me a slip at the end of the day. Okay, cool. Why is it 87%? Why is it not 100%? Well, because X, Y, Z. Like, okay, cool. That's reasonable. Try better next time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like you don't want to be the one person that doesn't turn in one of those sheets, you know? And then it's what we do in huddle too. Like somebody shows up late, I write their name down, and then I talk to them afterwards. And they know they're getting their name written down. They don't want to be that person. So guess what? After time, people are on time.
It's kind of like you're in therapy and you're sitting on the couch, and then you say something and they look down and they write it down. And you're like, wait, why did you write that down?
And then they start writing more.
You're like, oh no.
Oh man.
But it, you know, the only way to really, you know, you don't have systems if you don't have accountability. So you have to keep people accountable, and they want you to keep them accountable too. It's like that's how your respect increases, and that's how they, you know, they really follow through with things and do a better job, which builds their confidence, which like it's cyclical. It just continually gets better.
It's a proven fact too. You see it with team members all the time. Like if you're not providing feedback on what they're doing or how they're doing things, they're just kind of rolling with what they know. And a lot of times, like, oh, I didn't even realize like I could do it this way, or this is so much easier. Thank you for showing me because I've been doing it this way so long, and I thought that was the only way I can do it. And a lot of times they're working very inefficiently because we're hands off. And it's like, well, I don't want to be a micromanager, but it's like there's a balance between that of managing and then dictating, right? And you have to find that balance of saying, hey, this is how I want it done and systemizing it. But once they have the system, then you have the checks and balances of accountability put into place, but you're not sitting over top of them checking every single thing.
Yeah, and just auditing at the end of the day. And then once you do find something, then you go down the rabbit hole, but you're not going down every single rabbit hole every day. You just audit. And then when you find somebody like on an assistant side, right, it's like, okay, if somebody didn't get a consent, then you go to that person and say, hey, I saw there wasn't a consent here. Will you call the patient and make sure they come back and get that consent signed? Do you think they're going to forget it the next time? No, because that patient's going to be upset with them, right? They don't want to feel that way. So, and if your team knows that you're going to keep them accountable, then it becomes easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they're not wondering, am I doing this the right way? Am I doing this the wrong way? Or scared that I'm going to get in trouble, because they know what to expect. Expectations are key. That's a lot of times why we have stress and anxiety, is because we don't know what to expect. We're kind of rounding up on time here, but guys that are listening, we're going to have Kirk here on a lot more here soon, and we're going to have a ton of fun on this podcast because there's so much that we can dive in. And one thing that Kirk and I can share is we're non-career dentists, like dental professionals. I said dentists because we're definitely not dentists, but we're non-career dental professionals, meaning that we both came out from an outside industry. Kirk was music, mine was professional skateboarding, but we share a lot of the same kind of aspects of what we've learned on outside industries, because music and skateboarding, at least for me, kind of played hand in hand with a lot of things, because we had half pipes at concerts all the time that I skated, and a ton of fun. But it's there's a lot of things that we learned, a lot of lessons that we learned, and also just having an outside view on dentistry. I also had the ability to be a dental technician for 11 years. So that put me on the outside, on a different side of dentistry, to see patient experience and see how these teams interact with their patients. So we're able to provide just a different view that not a lot of people have the ability. And, Kirk, with his wife being the dentist, he gets to see ownership on that side. And, so it gives us just an outside, kind of like that airplane view, like you said, 30,000-foot view. That we just looked at things a little bit differently. And that's what our goal is, to just provide good information on how we can manage our teams, build our teams, and also, docs, get you on board with empowering your office managers to take charge of your practice to get you to crush it. Any final thoughts, Kirk?
No, I'm just glad to be here. Glad to hang out again. And any way that we can provide value for people and to try to help them get to that next step is always good.
Absolutely. Well, guys, this is another awesome episode of Management Unfiltered, and we will see you guys next time.